Give us a background on why you're qualified to talk about this whole thing with, P&G and other companies are doing with respect to loss analysis.
Tom, as you know, I'm a trained engineer with 4.5 decades of shop floor experience around running production factories and distribution systems around the world. So it's our core DNA. We're trained from the very beginning around how to deliver, very importantly, standard, repeatable performance.
Why don't you spend a minute and give us a little more background on why we're not in it for a dollar? Because I thought that was the whole goal of this thing.
Actually, it's to allow you to set up your operations and run them in a way that you can repeat them at scale over and over and over with operational excellence. Now, obviously, you're going to have dollars that fall out of certain components. What's the standard, Tom? What do we compare to? And then how do we know whether we're each doing the work in a similar way? So it is all about that. It's called how you turn the work into a repeatable, scalable machine, as I call it.
Where do you think the biggest losses occur in the supply chain?
Without question, they happen in the basic daily workflows, right? So simple things like how do I prepare? How do I go through a picking process? How do I go through a packing process? How do I go through a loading process? How do I go through the queuing of trucks? How do I go through the execution of the handoff of the customization work that I do in a facility? All of them are work process oriented steps. And so, in many ways, you can think about it as if I can determine what my base conditions are, then I have a right to question, can we do it better? Can we do it quicker? Can we do it cheaper? Can we do it with more complexity? I can take it in any one of the areas. And your favorite topics, obviously, are in the transportation and the loading of the trucks and all of that. It gets down to the very thing. Step one, how do I determine what I'm going to put on the pallet, the configuration of it? Step two, where do I put that pallet each time? How do I determine how I'm going to do that work in a standard way every single time?
Where do you think the biggest hidden, things, losses are that most people don't even see on KPIs?
Actually, I'm glad you used the term hidden losses because that's what they really are, right? When you can't do things in a repeatable, scalable fashion every day, those are real losses. Those are things you need to focus in on. In the context of just managing, I'll call it the movement of goods, right? I'll give you three that are kind of everyday elements. It's dock capacity, right? It's called how do I actually get this amount of stuff through this building in this time frame through that many doors, right? It seems simple, but it is a problem. It's something that people take it for granted. Transportation availability, right? Is there carriage to actually take the stuff that I'm trying to get through the building and get through those stores on that timing out into the marketplace and delivered? It's how do I, once that trailer is available, how do I utilize it to the fullest? But yet, one of the more basic things at delivering that isn't can I schedule a worker? Can I actually pick up a box? Can I put it in the truck? It's do I understand how to put it in the truck and in what spot to put it in the truck so that I'm getting the most possible fill out of that vehicle and not turning around and going, oh, that is a loss. Every one of those boxes is a revenue loss and a margin loss simply because I didn't go and take the time to figure out how to do that work correctly.
I'm not
Yeah,
quite
and
sure how
that
you say that
happens,
in a better
Tom.
way.
And that happens every single day in every single facility in general around not only the US, but the globe.
Go back and say, we always think about the execution, it's where the rubber meets the road. But if you go back upstream a little bit to planning, aren't a lot of the losses already built in when the plan is created?
Oh, jackpot. You've hit on a big one. Yes. The answer is to your question, without question. We actually haven't mapped our processes end to end across the value stream to understand that when I get that large scale chunk of demand and I'm trying to then orchestrate it through the buildings, through the doors, to the carriers, out to the customer, that you can't fit that much through that pipe in that time frame or in that window or through that set of carriers that you already have selected. And by default, guess what we end up doing? We use spot market rates, we use extra premium carrier movements, and then it gets to the end destination and they have a problem receiving it anyway. So I've spent premium money to get it and squish it through a door that wasn't designed for that much volume. And then I get to the other end and I'm paying a premium to mirrors, accessories, because I didn't look at my value stream and say the most I will ever be able to fit it in a repeatable way on a day, a week, a month, from here all the way to the end. And that's all the way to the end of the consumption point, i.e., that channel partner, that customer, is a maximum of about 25 loads per day. Wait, I had 50. Why in the world would I think I'm going to stuff 50 into a box that can only handle 25 without sitting in a holding yard someplace?
Yeah, you're talking about throughput capacity, but there's also that challenge that a lot of companies are running their warehouses near full, and now all of a sudden are you trying to push more stuff into a bag that was designed to only hold 5 pounds, right?
Correct. Right. Just because I say I can doesn't mean I should.
Once people analyze that, what where they want to be and where the losses are in the flow, what options do leaders actually have?
You get what you measure, right? And so going back and taking a baseline look at your analytics, what data do I capture on how we are operating? What level of variability do we have in how we are running the daily process? Are we doing that work consistently in 4 hours that I looked at? My standard should be that work should be completed in 4 hours, or is it drifting to 5.5, right? And so looking at your data is a first step. The other piece is realizing that this today's age, this isn't your grandfather's supply chain anymore, right? You really have to look at, whether we like it or not, some digital and automation of task and process tools to give us the chance to deal with the amount of chaos. I mean, no one is trying to design in losses on purpose, right? It's merely a result of all of the chaotic activities, right? We've changed the order flow, we've changed the order forecast, the demand forecast, we've changed the frequency of how the picking area may or may not be able to perform today. We've changed the capacity potentially of the building or the reliability of our transport, right? All those are moving pieces. To assume that someone can look and say, okay, how do I manage my repeatable standard work without having some help? I call it automated help, is kind of difficult, right? So you have to understand there are solution sets, some like yours, right, that can actually step in and give you guidance for helping you stay ahead of whether that work is still predictable and reliable.
So let me jump to a slightly different thing on that one. You mentioned before KPIs, and you go to a lot of different companies. You see where they are.
Yeah.
What's the story on, where do you hear from other companies about what KPIs are they using, or frankly not using that they should be using to look at losses?
The easiest answer is to say dollars, right? But when somebody gives me that answer, I don't trust it because I've got to be able to take it apart and they say, oh, we've lost $30,000 this month in trucks we couldn't load. I go back and I go, well, explain. Show me your value stream map. Show me your workflow that says that my basis for calculating the 30,000, right, is that my standard work ensures that I get out 20, I'll call it 28 trucks every shift, right? Or 128 trucks every shift. Then I'll come back and go at it. So the KPIs to me are more it's a sad state, Tom. Generally speaking, most folks are just using either an absolute dollar, which is off of an average that they've calculated of something, instead of going back and using quantifiable in process determined metrics.
What's that really costing them across the whole supply chain? Are we talking about, 1%, half a percent, 10%,
It's far
20%?
more. Oh God, it's far more than that, Tom. I place it on average. It's somewhere between even a well-run company, even best-in-class companies are still running in the 2 to 3% range just out of volatility disruption. I put it more close to call it 7 to 10%. Many times, the way they account for their costs or the inefficiency is across different cost buckets. And because of that, some of it remains hidden to them because they don't think of it full end to end.
It's interesting. We're running a series right now, purely educational on loss analysis. And step number one from your old employer, Procter and Gamble,
Yeah.
is define what the ideal is. And
Ideal
sort of
condition.
how many people would really truly understand what the ideal was?
Get down and dirty and literally go through, and it challenges you to actually do what look, as old time engineers, we were trained on time and motion studies a long time ago, right?
MTM, yep.
MTM, right? And it still rings true today. It's called wait. I have a specific amount of work that needs to be accomplished, and we do it in a specific way today. And we hope that that is the same way across all our workers, across all our processes to deliver this outcome, right? And what you end up unlocking by going through this activity is finding those pots of gold where you didn't even know it was there. I mean, it was, but it wasn't, but it was buried in all of your amalgamated costs, right? Where at the end of the day, just like in SAP terms, hey, wait, 4 years, 4 months, 4 weeks later, I'm now reconciling what I thought I was going to spend versus what we actually spent. I'm going, well, geez, where in the world did all that money go? Right. So this is a way to get at it and to get it real tangible where you can touch it and not only touch it, but grab it.
I've heard you say that, across the whole supply chain, if you look at an end-to-end process and analyze and optimize end-to-end, it's a really worthwhile approach.
It'll rain money. It will rain money. That is the phrase you need to remember.
If you're a senior manager listening to this and you want something to rain money, what are the steps you'd take today, tomorrow, next day? Because this is a journey, not an event, I'm sure.
It is. It is because you have to remember each and every one of your folks come to work every day trying to do their best, right? It's not like they come in and they say, "Hey, I'm trying to not do something the right way." In their opinion, the way they're doing the work is the right way. The question is, have you really held that up to a mirror and said, "Hey, it's the right way until you get to step 6." And then you deviate on 6, 7, and 8. And when you do that, it costs us 20 minutes in order or a collective 2 hours per shift and times the number of shifts times the number of days. That's real money, right? And you have to be able to take that step. I call it you start small. You pick an area, you start to do your mapping, you start to say, this is our current ideal state. And then you start challenging it the moment you have it down. Because when you start saying, well, why can't we do that faster? Then the collective wisdom, by the way, of all the folks that you have doing the work who deal with, I call it all the crap, will say, well, Tom, that's because Joe over here, I have to wait 15 minutes for him to be able to queue the stuff to get it to the dock, right? Or oh, wait, Sam, who's doing the picking, doesn't have a pallet jack, right, at the right time to be able to bring it to. So you start unlocking those and you go, wait, if I didn't have that constraint, now that process, 15 minutes for that piece of work for every day for the rest of the year that's money.
Indeed, it's money. And one of the areas we certainly ask folks to look at is that whole planning area. Okay, I keep going back to planning. Why? Because planning determines a lot of your costs downstream,
Plant,
particularly in CPG, where you're
yeah,
moving lots of volume by truck and 60% of your costs are in transportation and all that, and
and
half is in
unfortunately
water.
unfortunately today planning in most of the solutions that are out on the market do not take into consideration the logistical elements of the rest of the supply chain. it thinks the manufacturing component around capacity of the lines to have the amount of product or the buffer that I use, but then it just assumes that I can stuff it all, regardless of how big that demand number is, through the rest of the pipe. So you are correct. That is a big fallacy, and that's a great spot to start. You have to think about this. The cost of doing nothing is huge. If you really haven't embraced a strategy like this for how you think about how we're going to go drive operational improvement, you're missing the boat because we're in a world of the new never normal where there's always going to be a hiccup and a constraint, and therefore it means I have to have even better operational excellence than I have ever had in order to deal with that level set of disruptions. And how can I ever do that, Tom, as you said, if I don't know what my ideal state is, right?
Yep.
So you can't do nothing and wish it into existence.
And so that is so true of almost everything we work on in life, right?
Yep.
Jake, thanks for your time today. Always good to hear the John Wayne of supply chain making, good comments about, frankly, a problem that's hidden from a lot of companies. Thanks again.
Thank you.